All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick and our good friend Eric Froton, college football, college sports extraordinaire. Keen to get your thoughts, Eric, on a lot of draft markets with the draft 2 weeks from now on April 25th. These markets are going to move all over the place, so I'll try and get in front of as many as possible. And then Drew and I are going to close out talking a little NBA. And I will actually throw a little bonus thing in the end, but we'll get to that. Eric, how's it going, mate? How's everything going in terms of draft prep?
Yeah, it's going great. Cranking out the profiles for NBC Sports so that when everybody wants to know about these players that are getting taken come draft day, all those preloaded profiles will be ready to go for you. So, be on the lookout. And I just released my IDL rankings column, very detailed collegiate performance analysis of the top 10 interior defensive linemen. And I'll be releasing my edge rankings tomorrow. I'll keep cascading through that until the draft hits. So, busy run up as always. Very exciting.
I love it, man. Well, let's dive right in at the top. A little bit of market update from when we talked about the draft a week ago. It is now looking something or at least the implied odds are telling you something like a 66% chance that Washington is dialed in on Daniels as their guy. I think there are a couple of people who have pretty large platforms who are starting to really kind of fan the flames of this bit. So this could get away. I will ask you in specific context because there are some top 3 exacta markets which pay non-trivial amount to take advantage of this, where you can get Williams 1, Daniels 2, and then fill in the blank 3. Do you buy this Daniels 2 smoke number 1, and then do you think that makes it very likely that May goes 3 and we can kind of capitalize this at plus 125 right now as an exacta?
I feel good about Daniels going 2, but I don't feel great. I do think there's still a potential that Drake may, there's always smoke screens that get thrown out there during draft week in the lead up. And I do think that, obviously you could have gotten Daniels at minus 125 last week when my betting column came out. That is now tilted. Obviously, it's getting kind of out of hand at this point, as you're mentioning. So I don't think there's really value at that point. But with the exacta markets, it's kind of a way to be able to cheat that system a little bit, as you kind of alluded to. You're not going to be able to get anything, particularly favorable in the 1-on-1s. So with Caleb being a legitimate given at 1, he's already got the playbook. You can sort of manipulate that into whatever you feel is the best option between Daniels and May, So in terms of the exacta markets themselves, you got Caleb, May, and Jaden in that order going plus 250. I kind of like that as a hedge, in case you don't believe the smoke at the plus 125 for the chalk Caleb, Jaden, May. And then also can't be counted out the JJ McCarthy potential. Caleb May JJ is plus 500. Caleb Daniels JJ plus 550. So if you're throwing sprinkles, I think you could probably do worse than if May goes second. Perhaps the Patriots pivot and you get that JJ at plus 500. I think that's probably my favorite long shot of the group.
Okay, real quick. I just got to point out this market's not priced correctly. They're not correctly capturing the correlation between 2 and 3 here. Not even close.
Yeah,
like a fair. I mean, let's throw out the Caleb Williams one because that's minus 5,000.
It's a given.
Minus 50. That one's happening. The second most likely choice for 3, if it's not Drake May, is Jaden Daniels. He will not be available, right? So right away, like not accounting for that correlation. If you just do true odds parlays, you're at something like plus 141 here, considering what the market is telling you the likelihood of May going 3rd is. The fact that you're getting plus 125, that tiny discount is not correct. Jay, do you have a general thought on how this happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange market surprise. I think I've spoken about this in the past, but for some background, inside baseball on how a lot of these markets actually work at books, like I've spoken about this before, but say that in the Chicago Bulls game, like Ayo Dosunmu just got ruled out, Alex Caruso got ruled in. And so the way it works in most trading platforms is, okay, I'm going to bump up the points projection for DeMar DeRozan or Kobe White by 1 point, and then that is going to automatically ripple into points plus rebounds plus assists, points plus assists. All those markets will update and flow on. With these draft markets, it doesn't work like that. Like, it's a one-off event, and some books will have a bit more sophistication, but for the most part, a lot of this is done by hand. And you're going in and you're manually typing in numbers, and it's not super sophisticated or automated or accounting for correlations and things like that. So if you see an error and you're like, why does that doesn't seem to make sense? Well, it probably just doesn't make sense. Like, it's probably just wrong if you do a double take on it. So I think a lot of these derivative markets often go stale. And look, that's when I was doing it, 3 years ago. It's gotten better since then, but still very flawed. I will say with these markets, in terms of what's going to happen, I think, and this is just the way that I think about it and what my kind of default is, that when there is a lot of noise and a lot of uncertainty, I just in my head regress back to just what makes most logical sense and what has been the kind of consensus for the longest time. That's why the Will Levis going like 2 stuff last year, never like, is this really going to happen just out of nowhere? Same thing when there was all the JJ McCarthy 2 buzz. And like, what has been the consensus for the longest has been that Drake May is the second best prospect after Caleb Williams. Like, you speak to most people around the league, that is what most people say, is that Drake May is a better prospect than Jaden Daniels. Now, that doesn't mean that Drake May is definitely going to go second. Doesn't even mean he's more likely to go second. But I still just can't shake the idea in my head that that is ultimately what's going to happen. Doesn't always work out like that. Like, Trayvon Walker went 1. No one seemed to think that Trayvon Walker should go 1 in that draft, but he ended up doing so. So that is kind of what I've got my eye on. But Eric, going past the first 3 picks to the number 4 overall pick, I think for a long time this has been thought to be the landing spot for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's minus 200. JJ McCarthy, the second favorite, plus 400. The idea likely being that a team like Minnesota or Denver or whomever would trade up for him. Do you think that the Cardinals ultimately take Marvin Harrison, or do you think that this could get a little weird?
I mean, gosh, with Monty Ossenfort, you never really know, because if we look at what Arizona did last year when they were in a similar situation, they were in the number 3 pick and they traded down to 12 with the Texans. So the Texans could come up and get CJ Stroud, and then from 12 traded up to 6 so they could get Paris Johnson Jr. So GM Monty Ossenfort, not afraid to go up and down the board. Just because he drops doesn't mean he won't take capital and get back up and kind of get to where he thinks he needs to be. I think that in terms of team needs, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. falling in their laps here. It's tough to say no. They've been looking for that number 1 after DeAndre Hopkins left. And, I don't think they have anybody on the roster currently. If you look at that depth chart, I mean, they need somebody. It just seems like it's a perfect fit for the team need, which made me, in my mock draft, have them stay here. So, I mean, that's my particular lean, is a stay, just because the need and the fit is so perfect. And then for, perhaps either Las Vegas or Minnesota to target, the Chargers. But hey, it's entirely possible they could trade down and then trade back up.
It's an interesting call. And I'm starting to get the sense that, well, 2 things, I guess. There's sort of a conventional wisdom about, well, if the Vikings were going to trade up to 4, like, wouldn't they have just do it, right? Just like don't put yourself in a situation where you have to negotiate on the fly, and maybe you get a worse deal than is available right now. And people would answer with, well, what if the guy they really want's not going to be there? And I'm like, okay, well, they really they have such a higher grade for a guy like JJ McCarthy over the other 2 guys that if they would trade into 4 and he were to be available, then somehow they would not be willing to take the other guy. That doesn't really check out to me. And so in that context, starting to feel like the expectation or likelihood that a trade up is happening for 4 or 5 is starting to get softer. And if it's ultimately the 5 that the Vikings have their eyes on to trade up to, and they're just trying to hold on and wait and make sure nobody goes up to 4, or that they can make the best offer for 4 at the time, then maybe that is ultimately what's happening here. But do you live in a world now where you're kind of seeing the same sort of stuff, where the idea that McCarthy goes 4 or 5 is maybe a little bit over anticipated by the market? Because certainly outside of all of the breadcrumbs being connected between Minnesota and McCarthy, is his market really that hot for any other team that needs a quarterback?
Well, since last week, he was at plus 430 on FanDuel to go in that number 5 spot. JJ McCarthy was. And that is since, if you go and take a look around, it's down to plus 275 over at DraftKings. So we've seen that market adjust down in the direction of a potential trade. Whether or not that happens, obviously, it's up to the Jim Harbaugh speculation has been he has been full-throated in his love and defense of JJ McCarthy. Whether that's subterfuge and he's trying to bait a team into coming up at that number 5 spot so that he can have more capital, more ammo to kind of remold that roster in his own visage. And he has speculated he wants to run the ball, obviously, with maybe Joe Alt being an option here, the tackle from Notre Dame. But with Malik Neighbors there as well, and them losing Mike Williams, Keenan Allen being traded, having last year's somewhat disappointing first rounder Quentin Johnson as their lone real impact wide receiver, and he hasn't done anything. I got to think the prospect of landing Malik Neighbors, who's 6 foot, 195, 200 pounds, and could play that more explosive option opposite the big wideout in Quentin Johnson would be pretty attractive too. So I guess that, do I think that'll happen? I had that happen in my mock draft, but you never know. It's just, you never know with the NFL draft. I would have to lean towards it probably not happening given the needs of the Chargers and the fact that they could add a blue chip wideout or left tackle right there at 5 and not have to worry about it.
Yeah. Firstly, Eric, great use of the word visage, very underused word. So good job by you there. Secondly, keen for your thoughts on the defensive side of the ball, where Dallas Turner for a while now has been pretty clear favorite to be first defensive player off the board. He's minus 110 to be that player on FanDuel. He's plus 340 to be the 8th overall pick, with the thought that the Falcons are probably going to draft defense. Do you think, is there any other defensive player that you think could leap Turner? Be it the name that has been floated around most to me is Quinyon Mitchell, who's 10 to 1.
Yeah, Kenyon Mitchell certainly has a shot at being that, that pick. Looks like Atlanta will go, defense here. Again, this is another trade back candidate. If JJ McCarthy somehow fell to this position, I think Atlanta would certainly entertain that. If it were to kind of fall in their laps, why not take it? Since you could probably get a pretty comparable player at 11, they'll get at 8, and maybe get a QB desperate team, 8, 11, 12, 13. It's 14 even with the Saints. Any of those teams in the low double digits could be, potential targets there for them. When it comes to the market, they were minus 250 to take a defensive lineman / edge player at this particular pick. So if you're going by that particular standard and you're going to apply that to Dallas Turner, who is the nominal number 1 defensive player, you will be getting value if you're going with Turner there and there is no trade back. For my money, I just don't, there's not a lot of value at that right around even for Turner. There's been a lot of sort of recent rumblings that perhaps Turner is a lot more projection than production. You look at Will Anderson, his Alabama teammate last year, extremely productive for 2 straight years with 90 plus PFF pass rush grades. Over 50 pressures each of those 2 seasons heading in. He was more of a finished product. Still a lot of projection with Turner. Only really had a half year even of starting experience since they rotated so much at Alabama. So with that all kind of given, that all being a factor that he isn't that Will Anderson prospect, I think that I kind of would entertain the long shot odds here.
I like it. Anyone in particular?
I do like Kenyon Mitchell. If we're going with edges, then my favorite edge, and I'll have my rankings come out tomorrow. I think the cleanest, best pass rusher is Laiatu Latu for UCLA, but he has he missed 2 years with a neck injury,
Yeah.
and then got a second opinion and came back. So the medicals are what could kind of knock him down, which gives me pause with Laiatu. But I think medicals aside, I just think he's the most dynamic edge in the class.
Interesting. How about so if it ends up being somewhat chalky and we don't have any trades in the top 8, presumably the best player available for the Bears at 9 would be Rome Odunze.
Correct.
Is that looking more like a certainty to you than anything else in the top 10 that we haven't already hit on? If there is an X factor surprise wild card that the Bears kind of go in a different direction, who would it be?
I really like the DraftKings Rome Odunze over 8.5 draft position spot. It's only juiced 125. That's not bad at all for some of these lines. You'll look at Bo Nix, who we'll talk about later, much heavier juice here. So I think that if you start doing the math, and you realize just how top 8, 4 of those spots are probably off the board, with QBs. Marvin Harrison's going to be another one. There's 5. Joe Alt is looking very, very likely, if not, a lock to be in one of those first 8 spots. It starts getting a little thin. Malik Neighbors is there. He's probably going there too. So I just think the way the board is shaping up, a lot of things have to happen to break in Rome Odunze's favor for that to transpire, for him to be in that top 8. I think you probably even look at maybe a Jets if they get desperate and they want another, strong number 2 complement to Garrett Wilson. Maybe they trade up from 10 to 8, 10 to 7. Like that could potentially happen. Don't get me wrong. But I think it would take a team jumping the Bears for Odunze to beat this 8.5 line. I think that's probably my favorite play of the current board in the early lines.
Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense just because I think his number has kind of been there for a while and it probably hasn't moved as much as it should with the growing consensus that JJ McCarthy is going to go in the top 8 because he was being mocked at in 11, that type of range initially early in the process. But with the idea that, we're going to get 4 quarterbacks probably in the top 5 picks at this point, and then you have Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors, who are seemingly not locks, but they seem to be the consensus top 2 wide receivers for most teams. And then the Titans surely cannot draft a wide receiver with having shelled out for Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins already on the roster. And then the Falcons presumably cannot spend another top 10 pick on a skill position player, having taken Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson back to back. So no, I like the look on Odunze. Couple other over-under draft position markets. Eric, Brian Thomas, his over-under is 15.5, and Bo Nix, his over-under is 32.5, with the over being backed on both of those. Either of those markets or both of them, if you want to take it there, that you like.
Wow. Brian Thomas Jr. was the best opening line of this entire market yesterday. Was listed initially at 15.5 for his draft position at -120. He is currently at 16.5, -175. As we literally are sitting here filming, it went from -160 to -175. And man, I was ready to tell you how much I love this, and it's becoming a bit obvious that this is a mispriced line. I think you're going to see this bump up to 17 because 17 is the magic number. That is the Jaguars. And that's pretty much the earliest reasonable position that we've seen him mocked at for most of the offseason. If you look at the most recent stuff, Mock Draft Database is an incredible resource. You'd be hard-pressed to see him going even in the teens over the course of, the past, call it 25, 30 mock drafts. that have been done. So I think it's a real reach for him to go above 16.5. I think it eventually settles at 17.5. So, it would have been a lot nicer to get it when this first opened, but there's still a little bit of value, I feel like, there, since I do think you'll see that 17.5 push coming imminently.
Yeah, it is an interesting kind of lopsided distribution of where he's being mocked right now. A lot of 17, 18, some 22s out there, 23s. I see some 28s. Mel Kiper has him going 28 to the Bills. That may be dreaming.
Keep in
But
mind,
the
with 16, that's the Seahawks. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? So
yeah.
are they going to go out after taking Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Last year, after having DK Metcalf already there? Oh, they're going to go after liquidating their defense and take Brian Thomas there? I'm
I will
sorry.
tell you
It's like a dead spot. 16 is dead. 17 is
So
the number. I don't get it.
not to throw in your argument under the bus, but a wind of caution. Weirdly, the one guy who in the entire mock draft space who is super plugged into the Seahawks has the Seahawks taking him 16 for some reason. So
very interesting.
Rob Stan. Yeah,
That's a hell of a receiver core, right? Why would you re-sign Lockett then too?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's thinking of that as like a plug and play replacement for him. But yeah, it's a weird that's a weird anomaly. Otherwise, like, yeah, there's not a lot of likelihood that he is going off the board this early at all. So yeah, I mean, no, I'm not getting in the way of anyone planning over on Brian Thomas right now. It does seem like for whatever reason his stock is sliding a bit. And kind of speaking of sliding a bit, it seemed like there was a chance that Mr. Bo Nix was going to go in round one. Coming out of the combine, as all the teams were being kind of just after free agency is like, man, so many of these teams really need to address the quarterback of the future position. Does that mean that you see 5 or even 6 go in round one? Right now it's looking like the market thinks that over 4.5 is likely, but who that 5th player is between Penix and Bo Nix is not clear. And there has been a lot less sort of glowing about Bo Nix than there has been about Penix for whatever reason. Do you have an opinion one way or the other on if he is a round one player? Because right now it's looking like about minus 150 that we see him go in round one.
Yeah, regarding who will be the 5th quarterback taken, it will be Michael Penix Jr. Not remotely concerned about that. And if it is Bo Nix, then the Denver Broncos made a mistake because they seem to be the ones most attached to Bo Nix. I cannot envision a world where Denver sits there at 12 and says, yeah, we're going to take him here. Perhaps a trade up into the very, very back of the first round is what we'd be dealing with for Bo Nix. But I mean, even that, if Will Levis and his arm last year is a second rounder, I cannot picture the skill set that we see out of Bo Nix justifying that. I am a staunch over 32.5. Bo Nix will not be a round one quarterback. It wafts of Hendon Hooker. Wafts of him where it was like, oh, is Hendon Hooker, maybe a team trades up so they can get the 5th-year option? No. You don't want the 5th. You don't want 4 years of team control with Bo Nix. You want 3 years of team control with Bo Nix. He is going over, even at minus 160. I mean, it's tough with the juice, but I really like that over.
Okay, it's been declared. I like it. Like the position. Last one for you, Eric. Over under 21.5 offensive players drafted in the first round. The over is minus 105. The under slightly backed at minus 120. Do you have any lean on this market?
My lean on this market was in very early trading. It popped out at like 16.5, 17.5. What I think it was 17.5 on the offensive side. I was full Red Fox. Take me. So it tells you of how far this market has moved. 21.5. I mean, that's a lot of offensive players, guys. There is a whole other side of the ball. I have to lean under. I know it's a little bit juiced there at minus 120, but I mean, just for the sheer volume of players here, I know that we're going to get a good, solid. The top end of the draft will be dominated, that top 10, by offensive players. It's just going to happen. But I think you see the defensive players claw back, and they can hit that 21 mark for our friend Drew.
Yes, If it's not well known, I am trying to middle the hell out of this. So let's get 21. That would be outstanding.
21. Just like blackjack,
yes.
baby, for Drew.
21 is just fine. And like the math works out that like
it does.
5 quarterbacks, that's fine. I don't need there to be 4 quarterbacks to get to 21, but the other kind of just general reads, like you're looking at 4 or 5 wide receivers, you're looking at 9 or 10 offensive linemen, your 0 running backs, 1 tight end. Like there's not a ton of uncertainty here, and actually like the guys that are currently in like the sort of the sliding range right now are offensive linemen who are in sort of that next tier, and our wide receivers who are sort of in that next tier. So the idea of teams reaching with their late round 1 draft capital to take the 10th best offensive lineman when, say, I don't know, the 3rd best cornerback is on the board. And, oh, by the way, look at the team needs for everyone in the, late 20s, early 30s. They all need cornerback help. Like it definitely seems likely to me that you'll see a little bit more defense later than the market is anticipating, and we can land right there at 21. If it ends up at 20, I'm still like perfectly fine. But like you were saying, a lot of the early numbers that were out there were just flat out incredibly poorly priced, and
very often with these kind
20 or 21 offensive players were good. Disaster is if a special teams player goes in round 1, or if somebody like somehow forfeits their pick because they break some rule. But outside of that, we're good.
Did happen very recently with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell people where to follow you and anything you want to plug specifically heading up to the draft?
Sure. Obviously, you can find me on NBCSports.com. I'll be putting out each defensive position as well as offensive line, top 10, very detailed college performance analysis rankings. So if you want to get a pretty good soup to nuts on a lot of these talented defensive players and offensive linemen, I will have all of those columns by the time the draft is set to kick off over on NBCSports.com.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, Eric. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. All right, this Saturday, Drew, the Premier League continues on NBC when Bruno Fernandes and Manchester United look to keep pace in the top half of the table when they face Bournemouth. The match starts at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, final weekend of the NBA regular season coming up. Massive slates on Friday and Sunday. Everyone is off on Saturday to watch Man United Bournemouth. Anything in particular you're looking for this weekend that'll shape any bets in any markets?
Big one yesterday for the Nuggets. Oof, man. Watched all of that game. That was a competitive 3 quarters, and then they flipped the switch, and they had the answers. They had the shots. They got a very, very unfavorable whistle. It did not matter. They pulled away. That was quite a performance by the old Nuggets.
One loose ball Jokic one which turned into an and one.
That's fair. That's fair. Before fourth quarter, it felt tilted. Like everything. Like you keep giving these guys chances. I think the free throw disparity had to be like 2-1 by the end of the game. I wasn't really counting, but anyway. Huge win for the Nuggets. I think that should clinch the deal as the Nuggets get Spurs and Grizz into the home stretch here. So 2 more wins would put them as your 1 seed in the West and lock up the Northwest for the Nugs. And honestly, that was a huge result yesterday. I guess. Equally huge result is the Heat did not come back from just a brutal performance early on against the Mavericks. They tried, but it was not to be. That has left the door open for the Magics to clinch this division with either 1 loss by the Heat in Toronto, which feels unlikely, or 1 win with their games. Who they have at Philly and home versus the Bucks. So. I think ultimately the final, it's going to come down to Sunday. It's going to come down to that Bucks game, and it's going to come down to the Bucks. Just like they're going to have the 2 locked up, probably. Like them beating the Magic yesterday really helped their case a lot. And I think the Bucks can kind of lock up the 2 seed because I mean, I don't really know what the Thunder have to play for, and the Bucks should get a win there, and then at that point. Just let the bench mob go, let the Magic get their win, and lock up the Southeast, and then we can all take a deep exhale. In terms of like understanding the fabric of the playoff picture, the game to watch tonight without any question is Kings versus the Pelicans. This one's going to be intense. I would say that this is not going to help anyone listening because this will have already happened, but that game has like elimination feel to it, because a win for the Pelicans would put them in cruise control for a 6th seed, which I do not want, and a win for the Kings kind of keeps them out of the 9-10 likelihood that they fall into the 9-10 game, which I would like. So I'm going to lose either way on that one. But the rest of the Pelicans have 2 more games that are losable against the Warriors and the Lakers. So what I need the most this weekend is probably Pelicans beat the Kings tonight, I guess, and then lose to the Lakers and the Warriors, which is threading a little bit of a needle, but I put myself in a precarious situation. So it is what it is.
Yeah, we'll say the Bucks situation is very interesting. It's just come out that Damian Lillard is out for the game against the Thunder. So I don't know what is going on there. I guess he's actually hurt. So like adductor soreness. Whenever it's soreness with 3 days left in the season, it always raises some alarm bells. So perhaps they're just resting him. But they're going to be in an interesting spot, because as Magic men, what we really need is we need the Knicks to be losing games. We need the Cavs to be losing games. And ideally, the Bucks would just beat the Thunder, because if the Bucks are locked into a seed on that final Sunday, they're not playing anyone. There is no way that they're playing their guys in a meaningless game, particularly with just the age of those players and with what's happened to Giannis. But there's also a chance that it could break in a way that the Bucks might actually be incentivized to lose to the Magic and lock in a playoff matchup with potentially the Magic, or at least
that's a great point.
Out of the top 6. So there is a lot of weirdness going on. It's so bunched up at the moment. The Sixers are in 7th at 45 and 35, and the Cavs are in 4th at 47 and 33. And all of those spots are kind of up for grabs. I think the most interesting thing in the entire playoff picture is just, where does Philly end up? Because I think right now, with Giannis ailing, Philly are likely the second best team in the East, or at least have the second highest ceiling of anyone, if we presume that Giannis is going to miss a couple of games in the playoffs, or at least that he won't be 100% right. And so, the Sixers, are they going to get like potentially a 5 seed and play like a pretty mediocre at this point Cavs team in round 1? Are they going to get a 6 seed and play the Bucks without Giannis for the first half of first round series? Or are they going to be like in the play-in, which is also very viable? So all of that is very much in flux. Have you had any bets in either of the conference outright markets lately?
No, I'm very happy with my position in the Eastern Conference on the Celtics, and adding at this point, I think you're better off just hitting game by game, series by series in the East. I don't see any reason to get involved in those outrights at this point. West, the only things I have from West were kind of all around the All-Star break. There's going to be a bet to be made once we see how the West bracket shapes up. I'm assuming that we're basically locked in at 1 through 5 right now. It's going to be tough for that to, like, something weird is going to have to happen, I think, for 1 through 5 to change. I know Minnesota plays a couple of teams that are fighting hard. So maybe they do flip and OKC gets the 2 and Minnesota's the 3, but I think it's going to go 1, 2, 3, Denver, Minnesota, OKC. And then I think LA and Dallas are pretty squarely locked in 4 or 5. 6, I would, if it's the Suns, a series price between the Thunder and the Suns is going to be very, 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 very appetizing to bet the Thunder, I believe, based on sort of the way the market is pricing the Suns right now. And then similarly, a Timberwolves versus whoever wins that 7-8 is going to be an interesting bet to be made on the Timberwolves, because honestly, the Timberwolves, you might have thought like, oh, young team, not enough experience, with Karl-Anthony Towns coming back before the end of the season, like the questions of his fitness and availability in a round 1 series, I think, are not as great as they were a week ago. And I think ultimately you could get a little bit of a discount if it's a name brand team like the Lakers or even the Pelicans. I don't know. So starting to feel a little bit more bullish on, chalkishness in the West. What about you?
Yeah, I think that the Nuggets getting the 1 is that completely reshapes the conference, particularly in terms of like you could make, I think, a pretty solid argument that the three best teams in the West, just in terms of team quality, not likelihood to win, but would be the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Mavs. And now they're all almost certainly going to be on the same side of the bracket, which really makes it open up for Minnesota and OKC being very likely the 2-3. And particularly if they're on the same side of the bracket as like New Orleans and the Kings, then it could be an absolute cakewalk for, at least relative to what it could have been, for either of those two teams. So I think that's the most interesting thing in the West. In the East, I think I'm going to be a Sixers fan in the playoffs, Drew, for better or worse. I got a decent position on the Sixers when Embiid went down initially at 30-1 to win the East. And if they can get the 6th seed and play, I guess, ideally the Cavs, I would say that. I mean, I don't think that's really realistic that Orlando is going to get the 3. So if they could get the Cavs in the 3 and then the Bucks in the, or the Knicks even in the 2, I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. I don't feel very confident in the Sixers. And I have a decent amount of Boston to win the title. Where I really go down is if Denver beat the Celtics in the finals, and that's my, not apocalypse, but that's my worst outcome. So if the Celtics are going to choke this away, I'd very much prefer they do it in the Eastern Conference before they get to the finals. It does seem fairly viable that the Nuggets could beat the Celtics in the finals, and that is how it plays out. But hopefully it isn't.
What kind of price did you get on Philly? Was it? I remember us talking about like 30-1 ish outright at one point.
Yeah,
it was kind of 30-1.
Yeah. 30-1 on the Sixers to win the East. Yeah.
Okay.
Is the price that I'm sitting on. I also have the Knicks at 17-18-1, which I think that if the bracket could certainly break for them, and I think that they are likely going to be on the opposite side of the bracket to Boston, which is helpful. And then in the West, sitting on Mavs 17-1, Thunder in the 9-10-1 range, and those are the two horses. So it's Thunder, Mavs in the West, which it's going to be tough for the Mavs now. They're going to have to go through the Clippers and the Nuggets most likely. Feeling more confident on Sixers 30-1, and then Celtics plus 500, plus 550 to win the title. So feel in decent position. It's just Nikola Jokic could really rip my heart out, but that's fine if he does so. So be it. Before we get out of here, Drew, just last thing that I wanted to mention, because I think this price is going to move. The Champions League outright, which I think most people will just look at and be like, oh, it's the Champions League outright. This couldn't be mispriced. I'm pretty sure it's mispriced at the moment because there is something there that makes no sense to me at all. So right now, Barcelona, to win the Champions League, there are still some plus 800 out there. I think probably plus 700 is more like the consensus price. But if you shop around, you might still be able to find 8-1. They are, by my reckoning, even money to make the final. And that's what the market has it as well. Like they're minus 500 to progress against PSG because they won the away leg 3-2. And then they will be favored, whoever they play in the semifinal, likely Atletico Madrid, could be Dortmund. They are rated by the market more highly than both of those teams, especially Dortmund, but Atletico as well. And so I think it's pretty solidly reliable that they are about a coin flip to make the final. They're not going to be plus 350 average price in the final in a one-off final that's neutral venue. It's in Wembley, so it's maybe slight advantage for Arsenal or Man City, but not, it's not at their home ground. And for context, last year in the final, Inter were plus 280 to lift the cup. That Inter team didn't sniff Serie A relative to Napoli. I think they were rated as a worse team than Barcelona is right now. Barcelona haven't had a good season, but they've also been cruelled by injuries. And these guys like Ter Stegen is back, Pedri is back, Frankie de Jong is playing. They're healthier than they've been in a long time. So I think that the City team in the final last year as well, I think last year's team is probably stronger than this iteration of City, which is stumbling a little bit. So yeah, plus 350, I think that's too big, even if that was to be their hardest matchup, which would be Man City. And Man City are a coin flip to get to the final as well. So I think Barcelona's average price in the final is significantly shorter than plus 350. For context, in El Clasico, between Real Madrid and Barcelona in a couple of weeks at the Bernabeu. Like Madrid are like minus 135 on the three-way money line to win that one in Madrid with home ground advantage. And so like if you just kind of math it out, like Barcelona just aren't going to be that long in the final on average. So I think that they should be more like plus 550 to win the Champions League. I think that price will move. I think the plus 800 should go pretty quickly. And I think plus 700 is still wrong as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not here to argue. And I think honestly, the idea that City gets there as a coin flip feels a little optimistic. They have a much tougher path. You know, that it's not going to be, it's not it's a nice asymmetrical bet where you can take the price knowing that it's wrong in the worst case. And then beyond that, there's potentially variance that benefits you on the other side of the draw where you're not even gonna have to do the hard work yourself. So I like that. I thought your wild card was going to be like Aussie rules football or something, not Champions League futures. This is good.
No, I gotta grind the tape and see exactly how the Brisbane Lions destroyed the Melbourne Demons and kind of make adjustments off of that.
That was a surprise.
Yeah, a little bit of surprise. The Lions cannot be written off. Still got a lot of talent. Like Barcelona, still have a lot of talent. They haven't had a great year, Drew, but it's still my boy Pedri. It's still Lewandowski. Rafinha played a blinder against PSG in Paris. Still João Cancelo, Frenkie de Jong. Like this team is still loaded. They won La Liga last year. It's not like they're a pushover. And I think that I just think the market is just kind of lazily repriced this off of the first. The first results in the quarterfinals. And I think there's probably a little bit too much weighting of Barcelona's rating to what they have done over the course of the entire season and not enough weighting to like who is actually healthy in the team right now. So yeah, riding with Barcelona. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, good luck this weekend.